I'm Suggs, and this is gonna be a SuggsView review and a big Ric Flair woo to you today, people. Today, I got my Quebec Nordiques hat on, my Quebec Nordiques, and if you don't know who the Quebec Nordiques are, then well, no judgment here, but they were a team in Canada, in Quebec City, a city that probably didn't deserve a hockey team in the first place. Like, who in Quebec, you know, the French population of Canada, who likes hockey there? Montreal, what? Like, no, they don't like hockey there. So what they did is they moved that team who was just getting good. They moved them to the States, to what I think is the United States hub of hockey, which is Colorado. Sad days. Sad days. Regardless, what I'm here to talk about today is something else Canadian. I'm here to talk about my favorite band, my favorite band, my favorite band, the Suggs' favorite band. If you don't know what I'm trying to say, I'm here to talk about my favorite band, and my favorite band all time, which is so hard to say because I listen to a lot of music. It's a lot of music. And a lot of music that are different genres, different styles, and from different time periods. Like, I listen to music from the way back to the way now. And it's just so hard to pick from all these countless bands, groups, musicians, etc., that like there's a favorite there, but Broken Social Scene is definitely my favorite. They influenced everything I liked musically afterwards, and they have just been such a big influence on my musical life. Suggs would like to acknowledge that though musicals, musical theater, and theatrical productions involving music are legit, Suggs has no involvement in any of them. None! That's not what I meant by my musical life! So to start, I want to just talk about how I got into Broken Social Scene, where I heard them first, etc. And that was actually on Much Music. So it wasn't just hearing them first, it was a music video I saw. Much Music in Canada is our equivalent of MTV, and much like early MTV, early Much Music, especially Much Music from about 1990 to about 99-ish, 2005, I'd say at the very latest, you know, really focused on good music programming and not reality shows and everything that Much and MTV have certainly become. And at the time that I would have been watching Much Music, I probably would have been between like 10 and 16, kind of in there. And there was a show called The Wedge, and in The Wedge, what it did was focus on alternative music or more alternative styles within music, and particularly alternative Canadian groups. And they played the music video, which I'll play a little bit of now, for Cause Equals Time by Broken Social Scene. So this was my first experience or first exposure to Broken Social Scene, and it was just such a monumental musical moment in my life, because I still to today I listen to Broken Social Scene now. I have all their albums. I love their music. I love the development of their music, how they got from where they started to where they are not now, a few years ago, because sadly they've broken up. Bunch of jerks, bunch of stupid jerks. Oh, we don't want to make good music and make money and tour and do things that like people are envious of us doing. We want to do things in our personal. Screw your personal lives. Pick up that guitar, pick up that mic, pick up that drum kit. Like, physically pick up the drum kit and play it, because that's physically possible, but you're stupid. No pent-up anger here. No pent-up anger. Absolutely not. For me, it was a band from my generation. Yes, a bit older than me, obviously, but a band from my generation that really just influenced so much my musical taste for the rest of my life, because Broken Social Scene just did so much to alter, to define what I loved about music. But the fact that they were Canadian and that I could listen to a band from Canada that grew up in you know, very similar situation to myself as far as where they're from and everything. It was just so cool. It was just so, like, I felt like I connected with them, and yeah, it just inspired my my love of Canadian music and my going out to search for more Canadian music, and they bolstered that with their huge lineup. Like, I don't know, I wouldn't call them a super group. I don't think they want to be called a super group, especially because it wasn't always one group. It was these shifting lineups, if you will, and just so many of the musicians that would play with Broken Social Scene either would go on or would already have very established bands or solo careers, and it was just so cool to discover other Canadian groups and other things like directly from Broken Social Scene. And I love Broken Social Scene. Yeah, I hate you guys for breaking up. Continuity. So now I'm actually going to talk about Broken Social Scene's music and not just my love of Broken Social Scene. Wow. So what I think Broken Social Scene does so well and really makes them a unique band is they bring together so many styles and genres of music and create their own distinct sound with all of them. So Broken Social Scene has some really dancey kind of pop elements. I think even some derived from kind of like disco and that kind of era stuff, but then they have your straight up rock, kind of alt rock and kind of punky kind of elements. And they also bring in, well, what a lot of indie bands tend to bring in is a lot of folk elements. Broken Social Scene, not so much on the bluegrass side of things, but certainly some folky elements in their acoustic songs. And I would even go as far to say R&B and kind of jazz elements in other songs. Now, on the note of jazz, it's certainly nowhere near as complex as jazz certainly can be, especially in jazz's in its composition and the playing of it, the technique, like the craziness that jazz can certainly be. But the cool thing I think about Broken Social Scene is though they aren't an overly complex band as far as their composition of things and their playing of things, they're really unique and really beautiful within their simplicity. So what I guess I'm saying is Broken Social Scene is a Canadian indie dance alt rock folk punk R&B band. Yeah, that works. Do I really need to make another continuity joke? There it is. So there really are just a few other things I'd like to say about Broken Social Scene. Okay. Especially a few things that have captivated me as an audience member. The first one being their use of layering. It's really unique for a rock band, you know, even though they are indie rock, and indie rock doesn't mean your standard rock kind of format. It means something unique in comparison to that. You know, their use of layering can be very standard. It still sounds great. You know, it can go from that standard sort of layering setup to essentially what is a wall of sound. It's like every layer builds and builds and builds and builds, and by the end of the song, it's every layer coming together that almost create this one sound, but then they can strip that back, you know, and it just creates this really, this huge dynamic change within their music that is just, it's beautiful. But on the other hand, this can actually kind of be a little, maybe at times, let me clarify, detrimental, I think. And I've talked to buddies about this one, and they tend to agree. It can be detrimental at times, or to quote workaholics, loose butthole. But by that, what I really mean is it loses its focus, it loses its connectivity, it sounds slightly sloppy. I hate to say, in one song in particular, you can actually hear the engineer in the booth while they're playing actually counting down to the next part, you know, actually acknowledging Kevin Drew by name, and it just sounds sloppy. It sounds kind of like they got in the studio, they weren't sure what they were doing, they're almost going to jam out this song, you know, the musicians and the audio engineer are talking, and they decided, you know what, this sounds good enough, we're going to leave it. And for a band that's as good as Broken Social Scene was, I feel this was just, what are you doing? Like, I get to some extent that Broken Social Scene is unique because of their sound, because of their use of layering, because of their mixing, their engineering, their mastering. I get that, but you know, not everything is art. You can't just be like, this is art because it's art. But really, it's odd for that song in particular because it's a beautiful song. It's a really well composed, in my opinion, song, and it's just kind of like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're disrespecting your own music, brahs. And lastly, what I want to say about Broken Social Scene is that their music is always fun. And that's huge in music, I think. And don't get me wrong, there are huge changes in dynamics, in feel, and emotion. Yes, there are songs that, you know, bring about, you know, tears in my eyes just a little bit, but it's just always fun, and, you know, you can dance to all their music. I love to dance in my apartment. Yeah, I'm not really sure where that came from, but it really is. It's always fun, and some of their songs I really like to describe as if the band is having a party, and you're invited! Yeah. So now that I've freaked out enough for one day, I hope if you've never checked out Broken Social Scene, you never heard of them, really, I'm not judging, maybe a little bit, but you know, go check them out. They're on iTunes and YouTube and probably anywhere else you actually can find your music, or where you get your music, kind of thing. And I just think they're so easy to get into and so enjoyable. And what you can then do if you're not into other, you know, Canadian bands or Canadian indie scene bands, then you can, you know, look at their lineup. Look at who's in the band, who are on the albums, and maybe you'll discover other Canadian musicians like Feist and bands like Metric, and you know, hip-hop musicians like Chaos, and Jason Collette, who I think is kind of, not in the sense of, you know, historic music, but there's Jason Collette, and Jason Collette's kind of like the modern Bob Dylan in the sense of the way he sounds when he sings, but it's beautiful music. And there are, you know, Do Make Say Think, which I believe one of the guys who was in Broken Social Scene, I forget in what capacity, but he went on to do Make Say Think. I believe those are all the things we should try to do in life. So what a beautiful band name. And there are others. So check out Broken Social Scene. And did I mention Feist? I hope I mentioned Feist. But check them out. Check out other Canadian indie bands. Check out Canadian music in general if you don't very much. If your scope is more focused on American or music from the UK and that kind of stuff. You know, Canada kind of slides under the radar a bit, I feel, especially in other countries, and even in my own country. So check out Broken Social Scene. I know you'll have a good time. Thanks again for joining me. As always, I'm Suggs, and see ya. Here we go. I'll get up there when it's my turn. Take my swing.